So the last point I made in the prior mini-module was that it's a myth that cybercrime is bad. Now, again, some types of cybercrime are most certainly bad. Most types are certainly bad. But that doesn't mean we don't learn from them and that there aren't certain functions of those types of offenses. Now, this is sort of a sociological way of looking at cybercrime. Indeed, back in the late 1800s, pioneer sociology Emil Durkheim talked about the fact that there are certain functions of crime. With a little bit of imagination, we can think about how these same functions actually apply to cybercrime. And what I would suggest is that through cybercrime, we actually see some changes in our society. For instance, cybercrimes might warn us about certain problems. This is called the warning light phenomenon. If a certain type of technological crime increases, then it sends a message to the rest of us that we need to do something to address whatever's causing those increases in crime. When automatic teller machines, ATMs, first became popular, there were many robberies that occurred near those ATMs. Because there were no cameras and no security, no one had really given a lot of thought to the fact that crime would increase near those ATMs. So the crime warned us that we need to do something to help protect us. In a similar way, cybercrimes warn us about changes we need to make. There's also the notion of social change. Just the whole, when you think about the way that hacktivists, and we'll talk a little bit more about hacktivists, about how the openness of information has changed over time and how we access that information. In the past, in some ways, the distribution and sharing of that information was criminal. But many hackers have believed that information should be free and open to the public. And that sort of thinking has promoted social change. We'd also note that in some ways, cybercrimes might promote community integration. Some would say that the alleged behaviors of folks in Russia in the 2016 election brought Democrats together. Suddenly, folks who probably were already together to begin with had a common theme they could come around and talk about. And we continue to see that thread bringing together different groups in that particular example. But we could cite other examples as well. If we see a business experience a cyber attack, people in the business would be able to come together and talk about their experience, and they feel connected to one another based upon that experience. We also can point out that another function is boundary maintenance. We learn the rules about what's right and wrong whenever people break the rules. So a function of cybercrime in this case would be letting the rest of us know that that behavior should not be a part of our behavior. If someone, for example, hacked into an account, another student's account, and we caught that student and disciplined them, or even prosecuted them. From that very case, other students would learn that is not the type of behavior that we're supposed to engage in. Now, theoretically, they already know that, but when these things happen, it's certainly a reminder about what's right and what's wrong. Durkheim, he obviously didn't write about cybercrime. Cybercrime didn't exist then. But what we can say is these ideas apply to cybercrime. The question I would encourage you to think about is, would you make cybercrime go away if you could? Now, this is a philosophical question. It's a theoretical question. when I talk to my criminal justice students, what I ask them is, would you make crime in general go away if you could? And it's an interesting debate they have, because many of them realize if there were no crime, they wouldn't need the careers that they really want. We wouldn't need police officers. We wouldn't need the courts. We wouldn't need security or private security or cybersecurity. There'd be no need for cybersecurity if there were no cybercrime. Well, that was an overstatement. There would be the need for cybersecurity to protect from hurricanes or natural disasters or those sorts of things. But we certainly wouldn't need as much cybersecurity if there were no cybercrime. So it's something I encourage you to think about and maybe journal about as you're thinking about items to write about in your journal. As we talk about criminal justice, the discipline of criminal justice, cybersecurity, another topic we can talk about is how criminologists try to explain victimization and offending. It's a large part of what criminologists do is try to figure out why people do bad things. Several criminological studies have explored the causes of cyber offending and cyber victimization, and they've come to different conclusions. And later, in one of the mini modules, I'll talk a little bit more about potential explanations why people commit cybercrime or experience cyber victimization. But at this point, all that I want to suggest is that there's to point to two theories so you know what I'm talking about when we talk about trying to explain cybercrime. One theory that's been widely tested is what's called self-control theory. And there have been several studies that show that offenders and victims have low self-controls. And this is specifically for cyber offending and cyber victimization. What this means is a low self-control is demonstrated by impulsivity, wanting things right away, focusing on immediate gratification rather than deferred gratification, and a number of similar types of characteristics. And folks who have that low self-control, which Hershey and Gottfriedson, the founders of the theory, say come from bad parenting and stick with us throughout our entire life, those folks have higher victimization and offense rates in cyber offending. Now, this isn't necessary to say that it's for certain a cause, low self-control, but there does seem to be a relationship. Now, some people have said it's a tautological sort of relationship. We won't get into that debate, but you can be sure if you take a criminology class or a cybercrime class, you dive deeper into that particular discussion. In some ways, what we might say is people commit cybercrime from this perspective because they can't help it. They can't stop that urge to do something wrong. Now, neutralization theory is a different theory, and this theory simply suggests, it's traced to Gresham Sykes and David Matza, says that offenders justify doing something bad before they do something bad. And the theorists suggest that they do this because they know right from wrong. And most of us know right from wrong, yet people who know right from wrong still commit crime. What Sykes and Matza say, it's because they rationalize before they do something bad an explanation about why it's okay to do something bad. They pointed to 5 rationalizations. First one is denial of victim, where this perspective says that someone deserves the harm they experience. Now, significant to point out that Sykes and Matza wrote their article back in the 50s, so they weren't writing about cybercrime. But there have been examples where researchers have found that people talked about cyber offenders who harmed someone because that victim supposedly deserved it. Cases of hacktivism where people vandalize another person's computer, or a worker who lost their job and then goes in and steals from their boss using their cyber access. They say that person deserved it. Denial of injury suggests that no one is hurt. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Office Space or not. If you haven't, it provides provides an excellent example, actually, of cyber offending, where the characters decide that they're going to steal pennies from every transaction from their company, and that if they do this over time, they would be able to net a pretty significant amount of money. Now, this would apply to denial of injury because they essentially were saying no one's going to miss those couple of pennies. Now, watch the movie. It is, again, a great example of, well, they didn't call it cybercrime or cyber offending. That's certainly what happened. And it was certainly a denial of injury that led those workers to do what they did. Appeal to higher loyalties. This simply suggests that people commit crime, cyber crimes, for the good of a broader group. When you learn more about the hacking group Anonymous, they hack for the good of their group. They're not doing it necessarily for themselves, but they're doing it for this higher loyalty. In addition to the higher loyalties appeals, another neutralization technique that psychs and lots talk about is what's called the condemnation of condemners. Now, this one in particular, what it suggests is that people will do bad things. They will convince themselves it's okay to do bad things because in their minds, officials do bad things, so why can't we all do bad things? In cyber offending, we could see how certain types of offenses might apply here, and that folks that, if they're engaging in terrorism activities or even the disgruntled worker, or those sorts of things, are saying that the people who have power do bad, therefore they justify their own behavior. Now, there's been a couple of studies that have looked at how these notions apply to cybercrime in particular, and there have been two additional techniques of neutralizations that authors have cited. One is what's called claims of future patronage, and these essentially, this came out of a study that some criminologists did that suggested that sometimes what people will say when they're pirating is that we're going to buy something later. So it's okay to steal a little bit of stuff now because we're just testing it out, and we'll make a true purchase at a later point. Now, related to that, another one that was found in the same study is what's called digital rights management software Defiance. And this one simply refers to the times when people who buy something, some type of software, and that software has protections that make it so we can't share it, we can't copy it, and has some sort of control over it. The more sophisticated types of cyber offenders will try to overcome those barriers simply because those barriers are put in front of them. And it comes back to that notion that all information should be free, and that people with money are making it so that it's hard to access and share that information, and that frustration with that digital rights software causes people to think, not to do, but may contribute to their thinking that this is why they can engage in pirating behavior. It's sort of like when someone runs a red light and doesn't think that red light should be there. Now, it doesn't make it right. In their mind it might, but again, that's what we're talking about, is neutralizations that cyber offenders might do. Now, there have been other theories that have been applied to cybercrime, including learning theory, routine activities theory, and subcultural theory. And we'll talk more about those later. But the main point here is that these theoretical perspectives have been used from a criminological framework to try to explain cybercrime. More importantly, though, they've also been used to try and stop cyber offending or prevent cyber offending. In the next mini module, we'll begin with that sort of discussion.